In 1980, Ford Motor Company posted the largest single-year corporate loss in American history, $1.54 billion gone. And while every division of the company was bleeding, one product was quietly profitable: the truck division, the F-Series, the very thing some people inside the company were starting to question the future of. This is the story of how Ford nearly walked away from the best-selling vehicle in American history while it was right in front of them. To understand what happened, you need to go back to 1975, not to the losses, to the truck's beginning. The F-150 did not exist before 1975. Ford had the F-100, the standard half-ton, and the F-250, the heavy-duty step-up. That was the lineup. Then the EPA finalized its Clean Air Act amendments, and things got complicated fast. Any vehicle with a gross vehicle rating of 6,000 pounds or less would now require a catalytic converter and run on unleaded fuel only. Ford's solution was not to engineer a better catalytic converter. Ford's solution was to engineer a new truck with a GVWR of 6,050 pounds, 50 pounds above the threshold. That single number exempted the entire vehicle from the requirement. Truck buyers kept running leaded fuel. Ford avoided the converter cost entirely, and the truck that would eventually become America's best-selling vehicle for over 40 decades, the truck that generates tens of billions in annual revenue, the truck was born as a regulatory workaround. Not a product vision, not a consumer study, a GVWR calibration. International Harvester did the exact same thing in 1975. So the F-150 enters the market. It sells. Then it sells more. By 1977, the F-Series is America's best-selling truck. By 1978, Ford sells nearly 1 million of them in a single year. The Lariat trim arrives with leather, air conditioning, power windows. Ford is turning a work truck into something else entirely, and buyers are responding. Then, October 1978, Henry Ford II fires Lee Iacocca. A month later, Iacocca is president of Chrysler. The leadership vacuum at the top of Ford is real. Philip Caldwell is promoted to vice chairman. He will need to be ready. 1979. The Iranian Revolution triggers the second oil shock. Fuel prices double. American consumers panic and pivot hard towards small, fuel-efficient Japanese imports. Japanese cars go from 9% of the US market in 1976 to 22% by 1980. And Ford, which has just committed hundreds of millions of dollars to a complete ground-up redesign of the F-Series, the first full chassis overhaul since 1965, has not yet made a dollar back on that investment when the ground shifts beneath them. On October 1st, 1979, Philip Caldwell is made CEO and president of Ford. The new 7th-generation F-Series, the Bullnose as enthusiasts will later call it, enters production that same month. Ford earns $1.2 billion profit in 1979. It will be the last profitable year for a long time. 1980, the Bullnose goes on sale. New chassis, new aerodynamic body, new dashboard, the first blue oval emblem on the grille. By every product measure, this is the best F-Series Ford has ever built. Ford loses $1.54 billion for the year, the largest single-year corporate loss in American history to that point. Market share falls from 23.6% in 1978 to 16.6%. Worldwide vehicle volume drops 25.5%. In the first quarter alone, Ford loses $439 million. And yet, the truck division is profitable. The F-Series is the one part of the company generating domestic profit while everything else collapses, which is what makes what happens next so remarkable. In 1976, Ford's internal forecasting team had launched a $700 million program called Project Yuma. The goal was to build a domestically produced compact pickup to replace the Mazda-built Courier that Ford had been selling under its own name. The logic was straightforward. Compact trucks held 5% of pickup sales in 1976. Ford's models projected they would reach 50% by 1985. That's nearly 1 million units per year in a segment Ford barely had a presence in. Project Yuma was the answer. By 1980, with losses mounting and the Bullnose redesign not yet profitable, Project Yuma nearly dies. The financial pressure to cancel any non-essential program is enormous. Ford is hemorrhaging money. The redesigned full-size truck hasn't broken even, and here is a $700 million bet on a small truck that doesn't exist yet, competing in a segment Ford never actually owned. The man who keeps it alive is Donald Petersen. Petersen is Ford's president, an engineer by training, and the opposite of the polished executive the company usually puts in front of cameras. He makes 3 arguments for keeping Project Yuma running. First, General Motors is already developing its own domestic compact truck, the Chevrolet S10. If Ford cancels, it hands GM an entire market segment with no competition. Second, Petersen believes, against the consensus, that a well-equipped compact truck can command nearly the same price as a full-size. That is a contrarian position in 1980. Third, CAFE fuel economy standards due in the mid-1980s means Ford needs a compact truck with 4-cylinder options to remain in compliance. This is not optional. Project Yuma survives. But that decision carries a hidden assumption, that the full-size truck, the F-150, might be approaching the end of its dominance, that the future belongs to smaller trucks, that the $700 million bet on the Ranger is the smart hedge. The institutional weight of Ford is quietly shifting away from its most profitable product at the exact moment that product is keeping the company alive. Meanwhile, the losses continue. 1981, $1.06 billion. 1982, $658 million. 3 consecutive years, $3.27 billion total. And in 1982, the same year Ford posts $658 million in losses, the F-Series becomes the best-selling vehicle of any kind in America. Not just the best-selling truck, every vehicle, cars included. It has not given up that position since. In early 1982, Larry Moore, Ford's corporate quality director, brings in W. Edwards Deming. Deming is an American statistician who spent the post-war decades teaching his quality methods to Japanese manufacturers, while American executives showed no interest. He is 81 years old when Ford finally calls. His assessment on arrival is not diplomatic. Management's actions are responsible for 85% of all of Ford's problems. What Deming found was documented by Ford VP of Operations John Betty. Ford and Mazda had been building the same automatic transmission to the same specifications. Both companies met every requirement, but Ford customers were requesting vehicles with Mazda-built transmissions and willing to wait for them. When engineers investigated, they found Ford's parts were built to within 1/8 of the tolerance specification. Mazda's were built to within 1/16, twice as precise, despite using the same blueprint. The result was dramatically higher warranty claims on Ford-built units. The gap was measurable. It had probably been measurable for years. Betty later wrote that the assumption all in-spec parts were equally good had not been rigorously and not so rigorously challenged. Not rigorously and not so rigorously challenged. That sentence is doing a lot of work. Ford launches Quality is Job 1 under Petersen's direction. By 1987, vehicle quality, as measured by owners' surveys, has improved 60% from the 1980 baseline. On January 18, 1982, the first Ford Ranger rolls off the line at the Louisville Assembly Plant in Kentucky. It goes on sale in March of 1983 as a 1983 model, 1 year after the Chevrolet S10 already hit the market. Project Yuma made it, barely. February 1985, Philip Caldwell retires. Petersen becomes chairman. Ford posts record profits of $1.87 billion for 1983, described by UPI at the time as the biggest one-year earnings turnaround in U.S. corporate history. 158,000 U.S. employees share a $69 million profit-sharing pool, averaging $440 each. 6,000 executives split $83 million. UAW Vice President Stephen Jokic noted the disparity publicly and promised it would come up in contract negotiations. It does. By the mid to late 1980s, Ford surpasses General Motors in net income for the first time since the 1920s. The company that set a U.S. corporate record for losses in 1980 is, within a decade, out-earning the company that had dominated American industry for 60 years. The architecture of the 1980 Bullnose F-Series truck, the truck that launched in the same year as the record losses, the trucks whose future was clouded by $700 million worth of institutional doubt, underpins Ford trucks and Broncos all the way through 1997. Stories like this one exist throughout the truck industry. The decisions made under pressure, the programs that nearly died, the products that survived their own company's doubt. Subscribe and we find them every week. The Ranger that Petersen saved in 1980 became the best-selling compact truck in America from 1987 to 2004. Then Ford discontinued it in 2011, confident the F-150 could absorb those buyers. In the year after the Ranger disappeared, Toyota Tacoma's share of the compact truck segment jumped from 38% to 54%. Ford returned to the compact truck market in 2019, 8 years later. The forecast from 1976 was right. Compact trucks matter. Ford just forgot it once, survived the forgetting, and then forgot it again. The F-150 is still there, still the best-selling vehicle in the country, still the product that held the company together in its worst years, while the company quietly debated its future. The truck won that argument. It just didn't get to hear it.
If this story was worth your time, the like button is right there. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.